Hi everyone, Michael from Bullion Now, bullionnow.com.au. So this video is going to get a little bit personal, possibly even a little emotional. So I completely understand if you tune out of this one, and I got to be honest, I'm not even sure I'm going to release it. But today marks a day that I have dreaded for 34 years. In 1991, I was 18. I'd just finished high school and begun my university career. And one Sunday evening, I remember being woken by my mother because my father was taken ill, and 3 days later, he was pronounced dead. He'd had a stroke, and Dad was the ripe old age of 53. And look, there's a lot of things all tied up in that, but probably not what I want to focus on today. But it's difficult to lose a parent, and we were a close-knit family. I'm the second youngest of 5 kids, and the other 3, I'm certainly not downplaying the emotions and the struggles that they went through because of Dad passing away, but from my perspective, I guess you'd say, in some ways they had it easier. They'd left home, they were married, they were launched in their adulthood. Myself, and particularly my younger brother, we were still at home. As I said, I'd just begun university, but I was still living at home at that point. And I had a younger brother who was 11. And again, I don't want to downplay a lot of the other emotional things and just come across as focusing on the financial, but in a lot of ways, the period from when my father passed over those coming days, months and years, a lot of that was the germ that established in my life that created Bullion Now many years later. I watched a new widow, my mother, not only lose her life partner, but also be faced with the struggles of the financial struggles of not only an 18-year-old and supporting them through uni and launching into life, but also raising and doing the same for an 11-year-old. And there are a lot of things at play here. Again, I don't want to minimize the emotions and all those things that come with life, but I know at the time I focused partly on the financial at that point. Now, to give you a little bit of background, my parents emigrated in '66 from the UK to Australia, and they didn't come across on the £10 scheme. They sold everything they had in England to afford to pay for their tickets to come to Australia. My parents were desperate to get out of the country, and there's a whole stack of reasons behind that, not least of all being my father was the son of a coal miner, and my mother the daughter of a very high up in British aristocracy, and their marriage was not allowed, so they escaped the country basically to create their life because they weren't allowed there. They applied for Australia, they applied for Canada, and they applied for Sweden, and whichever came through first was the one they were going to run to. And in this case, Australia came through first. So they sold everything. They moved to Australia, which I'm incredibly thankful for. And they established their life out here. A few years before my father passed away, they lost everything. They'd worked all their life in this country, and they were in the process of winding down. They were selling the farm, selling some of the businesses that they'd created over the time. And unbeknown to them, a chunk of that money, a good chunk of that money, had been put into a financial institution that was government guaranteed by an Australian government. This is something that A lot of younger people don't realise, but this happened in Australia. We see it overseas, but it happens here as well. I've seen it happen a couple of times in my lifetime, where a government guaranteed financial institution one day just closes the doors and never opens again. And in this case, that happened to my parents, and they lost pretty much their life savings. And as I said, a few years later, my father passed away. That's giving you a bit of background to what came next, which was, as I hinted at, watching my mother struggle through many things, including the finances of raising my younger brother and then financing her retirement. And it was incredibly tough. One of the many things I took away from both that experience and the observation of Mum over those coming years was the importance of securing your financial wealth and future, and having it, not trusting it to quote unquote the system. I remember very early on with this basic realization, although I didn't know so much what to do with it, but gold at that stage was in the high $400 an ounce. And I remember purchasing some gold at that point because I'd done some research. A lot harder in those days. We're talking pre-internet. But I'd done some research, and I'd realised that I wanted to secure my financial future, but I didn't want to rely on banks or governments or big business or any of those sorts of things. So one of the many things that I'd come across was gold. And at that stage, gold, an ounce was around about, I wish I'd kept the receipt, but it was around about $500 an ounce. And I remember buying it. It wouldn't be a video without my phone going off, would it? I remember buying it at that stage and watching the price go down, and me, much as everyone else has when they've first launched in and bought things, Murphy's Law says it'll go down the day after you buy it, and it was pretty much to the minute it went down. And I remember being concerned about that, and my stomach churning, and I've done the wrong thing, and I'm following in in the same path of having my wealth destroyed. And I went back and I did more research, and I thought at the time, actually, I remember this realization very early one morning while I was out walking. I grew up on a farm. I was walking in one of the few remaining paddocks we had. And I remember thinking, I've watched this my whole life, where things go up and things go down. I grew up on the farm. I watched stock prices go up, stock prices go down. I watched land go up and land go down. I've watched this many times, and this is no different. If I'm looking for a short-term fix, then yes, it's probably a problem, but I'm putting away for the future. I'm putting away for later on in life. I'm putting away to secure both my retirement, but hopefully more, I'm putting away for my future wife, who I hadn't met at that point, my future wife and kids, and making sure that when I pass away, that their biggest focus is hopefully grieving for me, not concerned of where do we go from here, where are the finances from here, what's going to look after us. And that realization, that experience was the basis of my financial future, and was also in some ways the basis, the germ of the idea for Bullion Now, even though it took many years to come. As I sit here in a darkened car park in the middle of Melbourne on my 53rd birthday, I encourage you, no matter what your age is, to grab hold of your financial future, to start considering putting things away, to start taking personal responsibility, to not rely on governments, on big business, on super funds, on financial institutions. I'm not saying don't use them, but I'm saying don't rely on them. Have the intelligent conversations, have the intelligent thoughts, do the research, put things aside, and don't tell me I'm too old for this. I'm in my 50s, I'm in my 60s, I'm in my 70s, it's all too late. Because I can give you real examples of people that have traded with us in their 70s, in their 80s and older. Maybe not older than their 80s, but you know where I'm going with it. That have been in the later stages of their lives, and they have started putting things into investments, sometimes precious metals, sometimes other things, that has given them their stability to move forward. The stability to know that their family's looked after, or their partner is looked after, that there's something there, that they're not just relying on a pension to get them over the line. This has been a little morbid, a little sad, I suppose, in some ways, but despite the fact that I've been dreading this day for 34 years, there is a very large light at the end of the tunnel, because I did take action, I did put things in place, and we now, my wife and I, now have a nest egg that if I fell off the perch tomorrow, she would be okay, my kids would be okay. My youngest is 15. That financially they would be okay, and they would get through. If I can be, if we can be, if my company can be a part of that journey for you, it would be a big honour. But most of all, out of all of this, I encourage you to set some goals and to take some action, to take control of your financial future.